The CIA's greatest hits?
On February 28, 2013, a former CIA spy named John Kiriakou arrived at the Loretto Federal Correction Center in Pennsylvania.
Wait, is
on
that
February
that
28th.
Is this that Ain't that be told on TikTok?
I want mayonnaise in my ass.
2013,
Get
a
the
former CIA
mayonnaise.
spy named John Kiriakou arrived at the Loretto Federal Correction Center in Pennsylvania to serve a 3-year prison sentence for the crime of disclosing classified information.
A retired CIA agent who blew the whistle on the agency's Bush-era torture program has been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison.
John Kiriakou was the first official to go public about the government's use of waterboarding, first to ever be sent to jail for leaking classified secrets. We're going to talk to him.
The only problem is that the secret he had leaked was that the American government was running a program where they had subjected hundreds of suspected terrorists to some of the most horrifying torture that humanity is capable of.
Hey gang, I ain't gonna lie. I'm all for torture, gang. Depending on the circumstances. Let's say a motherfucker raped and slaughtered a family and made them suffer. I don't give a fuck if that motherfucker gets tortured, gang. I don't care. I don't care. Torture that motherfucker, nigga. Fuck. A nigga who kills a bunch of kids in the school. Torture that nigga. I don't give a fuck, my nigga. But that's not what torture is used for. Torture is usually used for to get information and shit and a lot of... Yeah. So it gets fucked.
But the program was illegal. Torture was illegal. Kiriakou had revealed that the CIA was committing crimes against humanity at a mass scale, but they were sending him to prison for it.
Damn.
And the worst part was that out of everyone involved in the secret CIA torture program, all of the agents who waterboarded prisoners, kept them awake in darkness for days, the politicians who helped cover it up, Kiriakou would be not the first person to go to prison over these crimes, but the only person.
Hey, nigga. YG had a few niggas tortured before, gang.
Even worse than that was that Kiriakou himself, he had never tortured anybody. The CIA was founded in 1947 for one simple reason. The United States had failed to detect the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in advance, which led to the death of thousands of people and the American entry into World War II. America needed a spy agency to figure out what our enemies were doing before they did it. The mission statement today is the same as it was when they were founded almost 80 years ago. We are the nation's first line of defense. But also 80 years later, we now know that the word defense there is doing a lot of heavy lifting. We know now that the CIA has done just about everything in the world except act as America's first line of defense. From illegally spying on and experimenting on American citizens, to plotting to kill foreign leaders, attempting to develop mind control techniques, paying psychics to travel between dimensions, creating horrifying cyborg animals, trafficking...
Wait, what? What the fuck did you just... What did he just say?
And experimenting on American citizens, to plotting to kill foreign leaders, attempting to develop mind control techniques, paying psychics to travel between dimensions, creating horrifying cyborg animals, trafficking drugs, torturing innocent people, manipulating public opinion through the media, and that's just what we know they did.
I really want to know about the public opinion manipulation game.
But most of all is the fact that they've spent the last 80 years figuring out how to reshape the entire world in their own image without ever saying so out loud. Some stories from the CIA are bizarre, bordering on silly. Some of them are terrifying, but some of them show us exactly what it means when people say that the American empire is, right now, operating with an agenda that goes far deeper than any law, military, or president could ever control. What I want all of you to do with this information is decide for yourselves what this tells us about our country and what America even is. This is the true story of what America really means and who controls it. This is the CIA's greatest hits.
Yo, niggas saying this like it's a fucking... Like their
anyway,
song discography.
John Kiriakou. I kind of had a hard time spelling his name for the script, and you're gonna have to forgive the lack of visuals. This guy is a spy, after all. There's literally only one photo of him from his childhood on the internet, and absolutely none from his early life in general. But Kiriakou is a pretty unusual guy. He's just this person where nothing about him is totally normal. His family came from Greece, but he grew up in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. His younger brother, Emmanuel, is actually an extremely successful music industry figure who's written and produced hit songs for Selena Gomez, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, and Jason Derulo, among many others. And then when he was in college, Kiriakou worked as a high school teacher where one of his students was future Hollywood star Jared Leto. But anyway.
Yo, what?
In 1990, while a young John Kiriakou is studying international relations at Washington University, he gets recruited to join the CIA by one of his college professors. And that professor was, naturally, Gerald M. Post, a man who had already made an international name for himself by analyzing the psychological
plant? But does that make him a plant? Like in high school, 3 of my classmates are currently now in the NFL. That doesn't make me a plant. You know what I'm saying? Ain't that just coincidences?
profiles of political leaders at the highest level during his 30-year career with the CIA.
I've just finished a project interviewing 35 terrorists. What is really quite striking is these are psychologically normal individuals.
And so after being brought into the agency, Kiriakou would first work as an analyst for Middle East geopolitics, before he was sent later to be stationed in Bahrain and Greece, where he would work as a full-on field officer, recruiting foreign agents, running counterterrorism operations, and fighting militia groups in the region.
Would y'all want to live this
after
life,
the
chat?
9/11 attacks, he was named chief of counterterrorist operations in Pakistan. During this time, he would lead military raids on Al-Qaeda safe houses and ultimately played a key role in the capture of Abu Zubaydah, who was then believed to be Al-Qaeda's third highest ranking member and was even suspected to have been one of the minds behind the 9/11 attacks. John Kiriakou was exactly what we think of when we imagine a CIA agent. A spy embedded deep within foreign countries, carrying out deadly missions to enforce American dominance over geopolitical situations. Shortly after the capture of Abu Zubaydah, Kiriakou leaves the CIA forever. And for the next 8, almost 9 years, he holds a number of jobs. First, working in the intelligence department at a major accounting firm, which is a thing that exists for some reason. I honestly can't really explain it to you. Then he becomes an advisor for Hollywood films because naturally, obviously, we need feds to do that. Then he becomes a consultant covering terrorism for TV news. And then after that, he goes back into the government to work in Senator John Kerry's Senate Foreign Relations Committee, focusing on international terrorism and piracy. Then he becomes the managing partner for a political risk analysis consulting firm, whatever that even is. And he's still on the news. Basically, though, even after leaving the world of spying, Kiriakou was kind of still living as a spy, at least in the way that
the guy who made this video scammed me. Fuck him. How did he scam you, nigga? What are you talking about?
Most people say once you leave the CIA, you don't really leave. But then, in December of 2007, during a live TV interview on ABC News, Kiriakou would make a name for himself that will last for as long as United States history. Because 4 days earlier, the New York Times had broken a story that the CIA secretly destroyed 92 videotapes from Abu Zubaydah's interrogation that showed him being tortured. But it would be during this TV interview that John Kiriakou would become the first CIA officer in history to come out and confirm that the agency had tortured prisoners.
Waterboarding was one of the techniques.
Yes. And was it used on Zubaydah?
It was.
And was it successful?
It was.
And he didn't just say that the CIA was torturing people. He called it a formal system, an enhanced interrogation techniques program that was planned and approved even by the president himself.
What torture technique you think would work on you, Chad? Like, all right, if they put this shit out, it's over for me. Everybody get a snitch on. I can't do it. yeah, what torture technique you not going? Rub my booty. Yo, okay. Watching a YourRage stream. My mod who mods every single stream just said that. Ball twisting. Icon, hummus. Cock, tickle. All of them. I think I could do waterboarding. The fuck you can, nig. Why do people keep calling me nig more lately, gang? What is that?
We had these trained interrogators who were sent to his location to use the enhanced techniques as necessary to get him to open up and to report some threat information.
The next day, the CIA filed a criminal complaint with the Department of Justice against John Kiriakou. Not because of torture, not because their agency had been running an illegal program that violated international law, but because Kiriakou had talked about it on television. It had long been suspected that the CIA was waterboarding and torturing their prisoners. Anonymous reports and rumors had made it a central focus in the media for quite a while, but no one had ever admitted it outright. And of course, they couldn't actually charge Kiriakou for what he had said on TV because confirming the existence of an abhorrent illegal torture program is protected by the law as whistleblowing. Even though he was technically revealing classified information, the nature of the information made it legally allowed. But the CIA would spend the next 5 years investigating him anyway. Ultimately, they would arrest and charge Kiriakou in 2012, years later, for having violated the Espionage Act, a law that was originally designed to prosecute...
Chat B100, if I was in the CIA, do you think one day I'd come out and expose that motherfucker? Or nah, I'll just like, you know what I'm saying? I need to thank for the sub. MF, Dub, thank for the sub as well. Unknown, thank for the sub. They could do the rats thing from Fast and Furious. You still would have snitched on YRG? On God, I'm not snitching on YRG, bro. Nah, you two pussy. Yo, what? You don't even expose your chat. Listen. Listen. If it's some... Yo, listen. I can't even tell you what I would do. Because then that'll... You know what I'm saying? It'll be telling y'all too much. But I'm for the people, bro. I'm for the people, bro. Expose the mods. Oh, y'all want to see the mod files? You want to see the mod files? You want to see the mod files? Yo, illicit. Your time has come. It's like, nah. I don't got no fucking shit. Nah, my mods is my hitters, nigga. Do you want to see the VIP files? You do what I'm saying? Now that's some shit. Now that's some shit. Now that's some shit.
Spies. They got him on the technicality that he had slipped up and mentioned the name of another officer to a reporter while speaking about the situation in private. Kiriakou was suddenly facing 45 years in prison. After receiving awards from the State Department, the Counterterrorism Service Medal, being the best CIA agent he possibly could, the agency was threatening to take away the rest of his life. With 5 young kids at home, he ultimately agreed to plead guilty to avoid a trial that could have taken him away from his children forever, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. And Kiriakou ended up, again, being the only person connected to the CIA's torture program who ever went to prison. The agents who waterboarded Abu Zubaydah 83 times were never charged. The people who authorized the program and destroyed the evidence were never charged. The aftermath of Kiriakou's case made one thing very clear, and that...
What's something? That's a conspiracy theory in your brain, or that you learned that you want to know the truth on, if it's real or true. Like, if there's one thing I could choose, I got somebody tell me the answer, yes or no, right now, it is this.
Was that speaking out against the
pyramids, aliens, Jews, MLK, 9/11, Mossad, Epstein. After death, why this nigga said Jews? Simulation, moon landing, religion, Bermuda Triangle, Terraria, leaders of the world, gay frogs, NASA, Chipotle, MKUltra. I got a conspiracy. Jesus was the first magician. What?
CIA.
It's not fun. You can't laugh at that shit, bro. It's not. I don't want. Just chill. Tighten up, nigga. Fuck, my camera broke. Wait. What the fuck? My cord. Colton! What the fuck? Yo, this nigga expects you're going to hell, gang. Expects you're going to hell, gang. The only reason why I laughed, this nigga expects type, yo, my stomach is hurting. And I'm imagining this stupid retard like laughing at that dumb shit.
Half the chat putting question marks be saying some of the wildest comments online BTW.
Is not safe. Because when Kiriakou was released from prison after 3 years, he only had more problems to deal with. The American government had taken away his pension before the legal...
laugh at my religion? Hit up Express, nigga. And that's my religion, nigga. It was my religion before it was yours, nigga. Fuck up.
Battle that led to him being sentenced, leaving him financially destroyed. His wife, who herself was a CIA officer as well, was forced to resign the day after he was arrested. Their family ultimately ended up living on food stamps while they were unable to get hired for any job anywhere. And shortly after Kiriakou left prison, they were divorced.
Yo, YRG Jimmy, your time. I'm gonna tell you just for a little bit. We can't have that disrespect, bro.
If exposing a government carrying out crimes against humanity to the world can ruin your life, get you investigated for years, put you in prison, cost you millions in legal fees, and have your retirement and your family taken away, the likelihood of anyone anywhere, and shortly after, their family ultimately ended up living on food stamps while they were unable to get hired for any job, any pension before the legal battle that led to him being sentenced, leaving him financially destroyed. His wife, who herself was a CIA officer as well, was forced to resign the day after he was arrested. Their family ultimately ended up living on food stamps while they were unable to get hired for any job anywhere. And shortly after Kiriakou left prison, they were divorced. If exposing a government carrying out crimes against humanity to the world can ruin your life, get you investigated for years, put you in prison, cost you millions in legal fees, and have your retirement and your family taken away, the likelihood of anyone else ever exposing secret society again becomes nearly impossible. I think probably the most telling part of John Kiriakou's story is the timeline. The torture of political prisoners was sanctioned under President Bush, but the prosecution of Kiriakou himself occurred under President Obama. Across party lines and across time, the CIA agenda
let me send the other one from my vault smile.
To hide his wrongdoing and punish those who spoke out against them continued unchanged. Plus, just a couple months after Kiriakou was released from prison, the officer who had personally, physically overseen the prison in Thailand where Abu Zubaydah and others were tortured was named as the newest director of the CIA by the Trump administration. The New Yorker would later write, "The president's studied silence about torture accountability and his refusal to put uncomfortable facts about abusive interrogations before the public has colored the reaction of human rights activists to Kiriakou's prosecution. If John had tortured people, he would have been safer than if he blew the whistle," said Kathleen McClellan, one of his attorneys at the Government Accountability Project, which defends government employees who speak out against fraud and abuse. John Kiriakou today is now very famous online. At first, he gained traction with the story of his imprisonment on major podcasts, but now more broadly, he's known for geopolitical commentary and entertaining stories from his life as a spy. Really, the guy is everywhere on social media. But that raises a question, because there's a long-held idea that once you're a CIA spy, you're always a CIA spy.
Yo, that's the thing. Okay, chat. Hear me out. Did you hear what he just said? There's a thought that once you're a CIA spy, you are always. Hear me out. Riddle me this, Batman. What if I'm a CIA spy and I come out publicly like I'm talking against the CIA? So you're low-key believing everything I say, but it's really a plan that is all planned to really take us attention away from what the CIA is really doing that nobody want to really look at for real. And like, the CIA isn't even in on it. Yes, they'll take some hit, blah, 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 but it's really to hide what they really doing for real, gang. So we didn't even fucking know for real, nigga. Who can we trust, my nigga?
When we look at Kiriakou,
you're a fucking nerd, okay?
Even though he went to prison, even though his whistleblowing ruined his life, it kind of makes sense to see it as technically being controlled opposition. The argument is simple. There is really no disagreeing with or criticizing the CIA. If you hear someone doing it, criticizing the CIA, the American empire, it's because they're doing it within the bounds of what the CIA allows. I think a lot of what I'm even going to talk about in this video is only allowed to be discussed online or in public in general because we've been convinced to not take it seriously. But whether or not Kiriakou is a brave whistleblower who risked his life to tell the truth, or really just controlled opposition who represents a deeper level to the system than any of us can imagine, his story makes one thing pretty obvious. When it comes to the history of what the CIA can do to their own people, when it comes to the seemingly limitless depth of their power, Kiriakou really might as well be considered one of the lucky ones after all, because he's still alive to tell the tale. Other people throughout the history of the CIA have not been nearly as lucky. This next story is not for sensitive ears. In 1955, in a quiet neighborhood near San Francisco's shipyards and docks, a new brothel opened its doors. And to the local men who would be lured there from nearby bars to be drugged and experimented on, it probably looked totally normal at first.
Like a whorehouse.
In reality, though, the madams at this brothel were actually paid CIA operatives, and the bedrooms they brought their clients to were laboratories in disguise. This was called Operation Midnight Climax.
That's what we call in our Patreon session from now on. Operation Midnight Climax, nigga.
10-year-long experiment where the CIA tried to harness psychedelic drugs as tools for manipulation and interrogation, with unsuspecting American civilians as their test subjects. And the man in charge was George Hunter White, a CIA spy who had previously built his reputation by bringing down Lucky Luciano, the biggest mobster in the world at the time. In private though, White was known for drinking martinis by the pitcher and using whatever narcotics he would confiscate. He loved heroin and cocaine and LSD, and everyone around him knew it. Colleagues would describe his substance abuse as legendary, and the CIA's internal personality tests had flagged him as being a sadist. What I'm saying is that this guy was pretty crazy. White's assignment with the CIA would be to set up a safe house, a front where the agency could test drugs on unsuspecting civilians. Because LSD at the time was a rather new discovery, and the CIA wanted to know if they could drug foreign spies to get them to spill secrets. They wanted to know how psychedelics could change someone's personality and behaviors, and if it could be harnessed as a psychological weapon for covert interrogations. And so White and his team rented this apartment, decorated it like a French brothel with suggestions.
Would you be an LSD test subject for $50,000, chat? 50 man, little test subject. Okay, what about 150 mans? 150 mans. Doing it for 10K. Gang, I said 150. I said 150 niggas said, I'm doing it for 10K.
Festive paintings and big red curtains and velvet furniture. Basically, it was a comprehensive prostitution experience. But the real story is what they had behind the walls. The building was full of two-way mirrors with recording equipment wired everywhere. And behind the rooms sat a small observation area where agents could sit and watch and take notes. They stocked each room with a mini fridge full of martinis and a portable toilet so they could stay all night. The agency directed the women to target working-class guys that no one would believe if they ever tried to tell someone what had happened. When the men arrived, the prostitutes would pour them drinks spiked with LSD, and the agents behind the mirror would watch as the drugs took hold, and the women probed them with questions to measure how their personalities and openness changed under the influence of psychedelics. And what they were doing supposedly was research, but as time went on, the operation started to look a lot less like science and a lot more like a government-funded voyeuristic freak show. Documents from the Midnight Climax files found that Officer White spent most nights during the experiments not recording data, not maintaining consistent doses, not building any kind of system, but instead he and his team would spend the entire night watching prostitutes having sex with drugged-out, illiterate dock workers while they drank martinis and did drugs behind two-way mirrors. Not only were they using random people off the street as lab rats, but the ultimate problem with Operation Midnight Climax is that there were no discoveries or research to report back. They ran this program for 10 years, and after a decade of drugging random men against their will, they ended up finding no breakthroughs in the science of spying and interrogation.
These niggas sat behind a one-way mirror watching CIA thoughts fuck on random niggas on LSD 10 years and no, what the fuck? Gooned out for 10 years straight?
Instead, creating a long
for that type of conclusion? Yeah, exactly.
Nameless list of men who had been abused and played with and cast aside by the government that was supposed to protect them. Operation Midnight Climax eventually grew from the San Francisco apartment to even more safe houses in New York City and across California. And it was only shut down not out of a sense of duty to respect citizens' rights and privacy, but because the CIA Inspector General feared a catastrophic scandal if the public discovered that the CIA was testing drugs on private American citizens without their knowledge. As bad as this is though, as much of a violation of privacy and liberty as this was, Operation Midnight Climax is just one tiny branch on a much larger tree, because it was only one of 150 total projects under the massive and illegal CIA human experimentation program MKUltra that ran for decades during the 20th century.
MKUltra, chat, we know about those. We know about those.
In the 1950s, American soldiers who had been taken prisoner during the Korean War began popping up on Chinese and North Korean radio and TV, praising communism and denouncing the United States, with some of them even proudly defecting to the other side.
Which
when 21
has
American soldiers refused to come home at all after the war was over, instead choosing to stay in China, where the North Korean prison camps had been stationed, a full-blown cultural panic began. Millions of Americans became convinced that the communist enemy had developed mind control technology. The idea of brainwashing, a long understood term in China, entered the English lexicon for the first time. The narrative of the Manchurian Candidate that people still reference today was based on this moment in American history. The American public was horrified.
Being captured by an enemy is a shocking experience for any soldier in any war.
Yo, that'd be
In Korea, this shock was made sharper because no one knew quite what to expect, except possibly the worst. Then there'd been talk of brainwashing. Wasn't brainwashing a big thing with the Chinese? Maybe they even used narcotics.
Gentlemen, we welcome you to the ranks of the People's Democracy. We are happy to have liberated you from the Wall Street warmongers who sent you here for their profit.
But it wasn't just a media frenzy or a conspiracy. Behind closed doors, the American government was seriously concerned that, as CIA Director Allen Dulles would begin describing it, communist nations had discovered how to wage brain warfare against American soldiers. In a pivotal speech he gave at a conference in Virginia, he would say something that in hindsight sounds like less of a concerned warning and more like a confession. The human mind is the most delicate of all instruments, so finely adjusted, so susceptible to the impact of outside influences that it is proving a malleable tool in the hands of sinister men. We in the West are somewhat handicapped in brain warfare because we have no human guinea pigs on which to try these extraordinary techniques. Just 3 days after that speech, the CIA silently authorized a new program called MKUltra. The story of what MKUltra actually became in reality, though, sounds more like a death cult than a government research program. I mean, they basically ran it like something out of a Jeffrey Epstein file. The CIA began by establishing proxy connections at more than 80 universities, hospitals, pharmaceutical corporations, prisons, and mental institutions, presenting themselves not as the CIA, but as nonprofits and research groups, laundering money through all sorts of front organizations to get access to one very specific thing for one very specific purpose: people they could attempt to brainwash. The man behind it all was Sidney Gottlieb, a trained chemist from the Bronx with a devilish track record. On the outside, he was easy to see as an unintimidating man with a club foot and a stutter. But stories from the CIA describe him as the poisoner-in-chief and the black sorcerer. Apart from MKUltra, he spent years developing poison weapons for the CIA. Poison pills, poison cigars, poison wetsuits, sometimes intended for killing Fidel Castro, among other foreign leaders. And in 1953, he was put in charge of figuring out how to destroy, erase, and break down the human mind to put a new one in its place. MKUltra was like Operation Midnight Climax times a million. They chose test subjects purely on the basis of them being powerless to fight back. Prisoners were bribed with reduced sentences, while institutionalized mental patients often weren't told that they were being used as test subjects at all. Sometimes they would look for heroin addicts off the street and pay them for their participation with drugs. At the hospitals and institutions they set up in, many test subjects didn't get compensated at all. Meanwhile, the CIA began testing electroshock therapy, hypnosis, life-threatening sleep deprivation, forced isolation. It's easy to rattle off these conceptual ideas, but this was real. They were really doing this stuff to private American citizens who oftentimes, most of the time, almost always had no idea what was even happening to them until it was already far too late. Whitey Bulger, the infamous Boston mobster, ended up entering into the MKUltra program in exchange for a reduced sentence while he was in a federal prison in Georgia for hijacking a truck in the late 1950s. He would later report that he had been told it was a medical trial for finding a cure for schizophrenia, although once it began, in reality, he would be dosed with LSD forcibly every single day for a year. He would describe, many years later, that he ended up constantly hallucinating blood coming out of the walls of his cell. He saw other people turn to skeletons in front of him, and he felt that his mind had entered into the depths of insanity. He would write in his journals that he constantly heard voices that weren't there, and that while he knew he was in prison for committing a crime, they had committed a greater crime against him. Many MKUltra test subjects were people.
My dog got caught stealing a truck. Not my dog, because he was a mobster. But they locked him up for that. And he got force-fed LSD every day for a year. Well, not force-fed, but he got fed LSD every day for a fucking year, gang. What the fuck? They gave this nigga schizophrenia, gang.
Who weren't even prisoners. They were just someone who went to the hospital for something minor and treatable. Let's say you showed up to the hospital for postpartum depression or anxiety. You could get sucked into MKUltra and...
So if I got sent to the hospital because my knees fucked up, my balls twisted, and I lost my eye or some shit, I could have been in this shit?
By the time you made it out, you might not be the same person anymore at all.
Nah, that's more so
This was
physical
particularly
injuries.
common at the CIA's covert research station at McGill University in Montreal, where many MKUltra test subjects reportedly suffered from retrograde amnesia and had to relearn who they were and how to function as a human being. Many subjects lost the ability to walk, feed themselves, or even their memories and knowledge of who they were. There were people who had to be re-toilet trained after MKUltra. One such individual who had been involved in the Montreal experiments, Jean Steele, was described by her family as never returning to be the same woman ever again, sitting all day in dark rooms, writing numbers on the walls, and in the words of her daughter, having had her soul taken away. In one experiment they hosted at an institution in Kentucky, a mental patient was administered LSD for 174 days straight. Other patients were put into weeks of drug-induced sleep, blasted with noise under their pillows for 20 hours a day, and hit with constant electroshocks. People were driven insane by their own government without knowing why. Another notable test subject was Theodore Kaczynski, later known as the Unabomber, who unknowingly participated in MKUltra affiliated tests while he was a student at Harvard in the early 1960s. The CIA's quest to find a drug, a technique, or a combination of both that could make a person do or reveal whatever you wanted, whether that person wanted to or not, it reached beyond humanity. It is literally like something out of a horror movie. It was torture. Eventually, they even began dosing their own officers. In November of 1953, a group of CIA and Army scientists, Sidney Gottlieb,
Like a state from Modern Warfare 2.
and his team among them, gathered for a work retreat at a cabin in rural Maryland. And after dinner, Gottlieb's deputy spiked a bottle of liquor with LSD and passed it around without telling anyone what was in it. One of the men that drank from that bottle was Frank Olson, a 43-year-old CIA officer and former Army biochemist. And unfortunately, the LSD did not sit well with Agent Olson. Over the following days, he became paranoid and agitated. He told his wife that he had made a terrible mistake and talked about leaving the CIA entirely. His behavior shifted to become depressive and anxious. Then, a week later, while he was on a work trip to New York City, Olson would plummet 10 floors down onto the sidewalk in front of his hotel at 2:30 in the morning and die before ambulances could arrive. The CIA announced that he had committed suicide and closed the case, but Olson's family, his sons who were 8 and 9 years old when he passed, they never believed that story. In 1994, his son Eric, who later became a clinical psychologist, had his father's body exhumed for a second autopsy, only for the forensic pathologist to find something that had never appeared in any previous medical report. There was, in fact, a large hematoma on Olson's skull,
So he got hit.
consistent with him having been hit hard in the head before he fell. Based on these findings, the New York District Attorney even reclassified the cause of Olson's death from suicide to unknown. And to this day, no one has ever been held accountable for Frank Olson's death, even though in the end, it was all but confirmed that Sidney Gottlieb, while carrying out MKUltra, had gone so far in the CIA's obsession with drugs and mind control that he ended up killing his own men when dosing them with LSD went wrong. I don't think getting thrown out of the 10th story window at a hotel in New York City after your boss tests cutting-edge drugs on you at a dinner party and it drives you insane is the most likely thing to ever happen to me or any of you guys. But if it does, it's probably worth knowing where to look. There's a reason that history is full of unfortunate incidents that no one wants to explain. Just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan, this video's sponsor, is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, in the video and supporting what I do. They tested and experimented on thousands of victims. They ruined thousands of innocent American lives with no oversight, total secrecy for 2 decades. And again, I feel like this just needs to be said. This is a true story. This is real. This actually happened.
Gotta be quicker than that,
In the
Batman.
end, though, a lot of it would be almost
Hold this video a
entirely
few days.
erased from history. In 1973, after President Nixon's White House was
11
revealed
days
as
ago.
having broken into the opposing party's political headquarters to steal records and plant recording devices, the subject of intelligence abuses, government overreach, and illegal spying became prevalent enough that congressional investigators started taking a closer look, really for the first time, at what the CIA
stream
was
injured
actually
me, I'm
doing
calling
behind
Morgan
closed
& Morgan.
doors.
Mr. Dulles, would you approve Congressman Lindsay's suggestion of a watchdog congressional committee over the CIA?
Well, I do not favor it, but I think that is a matter for the Congress and the President to decide primarily.
Promptly, Sidney Gottlieb, who had already retired sometime earlier, ended up returning to the CIA archives personally to shred and burn every record of MKUltra that he could find. Every record about MKUltra that ever existed was incinerated. Within a few years, though, journalists began catching wind that something was up. A project this big would be impossible to hide forever. In 1975, the New York Times published a front-page story covering illegal CIA domestic surveillance operations from the 1960s, and a political firestorm began. Within months, President Ford ordered sweeping investigations into the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, you name it. They wanted to uncover everything. Before long, they began discovering references to Frank Olson, the scientist who had fallen from his hotel window, and the mysterious codename MKUltra. President Ford meets with Olson's family, awards them a hefty payment for his death. He signs an executive order banning political assassinations. The public now knows that the CIA had undoubtedly done something that was probably terrible, but we really didn't have any idea what it was or why. A couple of years later, though, after a journalist files a Freedom of Information request to the CIA, it leads to him finding 20,000 pages of MKUltra financial records in the budget and fiscal department of the CIA archives. After everything I've just told you, it turns out that the facts we do know about MKUltra, how it worked, what they did,
that might have been the latest thing we already knew about, like CIA, MKUltra. Is there more?
Entire history of the program. And so naturally, the firestorm erupts again. A collection of fractured yet shocking details become public. The universities, the prisons, the front organizations, the immense scale. Senator Ted Kennedy famously describes MKUltra as extensive testing and experimentation on unwitting citizens at all social levels. And all of this came from a tiny pile of half-finished documents that someone had forgotten to throw away. This was really not that long ago.
This is only surface level, gotta be
I don't know, pop culture terms. This was all happening just a couple years before Kanye West was born. This was happening when Joe Biden was already pushing 40 years old and was working as a full-time politician. This happened during the last president's living political career. What I'm trying to say is that this was going on not in the distant past, but in our current living sphere of time and society. Before George White, the man who ran the San Francisco brothel during Midnight Climax, died in 1975 of liver cirrhosis, he sent a colleague a letter reflecting on his years in the agency. He said, "I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" Gottlieb himself was eventually called to testify before Congress. He claimed to remember very little about what MKUltra even was, even though he ran this program for almost 20 years. He nor anyone else who was involved with MKUltra were ever charged with any crime.
That's so
Gottlieb
crazy to
eventually
me.
retired to a cabin
That's so
rural
insane.
Virginia,
How
where
was
he raised
nobody
goats and practiced folk dancing? He
Yo,
died
nigga,
peacefully 30 years later. I think what's worst of all is that after all of this, after
Yo,
2 decades
what?
of untold
Is Rage
suffering,
brainwashing
the
us?
CIA
Yes.
never found what they were looking for. There was no magic mind control technique. There was no drug that could reliably break someone down.
Some of these
and rebuild
communities
them
got
as something
MKUltra
else.
or something. Some of these
LSD just
niggas'
didn't
communities
work as a
are
truth
actually
serum.
brainwashed. No
It
cap.
made people unpredictable, paranoid, and crazy. It ruined their lives. It broke their brains. The sensory deprivation, the electroshock, the prisoners and the hospital patients that suffered permanent damage, they didn't create subjects they could control. There was no brain warfare. They just destroyed people. But of course, this was far from the first or the last time that the American government would literally treat its own citizens like lab rats. As far back as the 1960s,
Oh my God.
even house cats were on the chopping block.
That's
too.
so crazy. Nigga said cyborg.
In the spring of 1967, in Washington, D.C., a cat wakes up on an operating table. Not from...
That's when my parents were born. 1967. Interesting.
In the spring of 1967, in Washington, D.C., a cat wakes...
And my mom was born in the spring of 1967. Is March considered spring? Yes. Right? Yeah.
Wakes up on an operating table. Not from a medical operation, but from the final surgery in a 5-year CIA project to turn it into a walking spy device. A team of veterinary surgeons had stitched a microphone into its ear canal. A small radio transmitter was embedded at the base of its skull. They put a battery pack in its stomach and a thin antenna running down its spine to the tip of its tail, hidden beneath its fur. They had created a cyborg. The problem was that early CIA listened a microphone into its ear canal. In Washington, D.C., a cat wakes up on an operating table. Not from a medical operation, but from the final surgery in a 5-year CIA project to turn it into a walking spy device. A team of veterinary surgeons had stitched a microphone into its ear canal. A small radio transmitter was embedded at the base of its skull. They put a battery pack in its stomach and a thin antenna running down its spine to the tip of its tail, hidden beneath its fur. They had created a cyborg. The problem was that early CIA listening devices could capture sound, but they didn't have the tools to filter it. Bugged rooms would come back full of echo and background noise. It was just a total mess. And they were just kind of stuck until someone realized that you could plant a microphone inside an animal's ear and get a much better result thanks to their more powerful hearing. Plus, at the same time, officers on missions overseas in Russia would notice that at embassies in Moscow, cats would wander freely through restricted areas and nobody would pay attention to them. To 99% of people, cats were invisible and unremarkable. They also have exceptionally powerful hearing. In short, cats are the perfect spies. It would take 5 years to figure out how to embed the electronics inside a living animal without killing it or making it look like a man-made horror beyond comprehension. Even after they finally made it work though, the CIA would face yet another problem that was really the most difficult to solve.
You know how many disgusting abominations, like nasty shit they probably fucked up so many cats, chat. Oh my god, bro.
Of all. You just can't tell a cat what to do. At one point, to stop the cat from wandering off looking for food to eat, they gave it brain surgery to turn off its hunger impulses.
I can't, bro. I ain't gonna lie. I can't, bro. What the fuck?
And so after 5 years and countless operations, the agency decided the cat was ready for a field test. The plan was simple. Park an unmarked van near the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., release the cat, let it wander across the street, and listen in. The agents opened the door to their car and placed the cat on the street. It stepped off the curb and walked about 5 yards away.
I feel like that shit's just not gonna stay where you want it to be, bro. That nigga's gonna wander.
And then a taxi ran.
What the fuck? Why y'all yo? What? Oh, that's not funny. What the fuck?
Agents opened the door to their car and placed the cat on the street. It stepped off the curb and walked about 5 yards away. And then a taxi ran it over. And while yes, the story of Project Acoustic Kitty shows a kind of silly side to the world of spying before the internet, before digital technology, what it really shows is also a picture of the CIA as wanting to control the world by any means necessary, stopping at literally nothing to further their own interests. But here's the thing, none of that was ever supposed to be their job. Everything I've talked about in this video so far was basically a side project for the CIA. They were built to spy on foreign enemies. Spying on American citizens on American soil, as sickening as that might be, it was all in service of their real mission: defend the country from foreign enemies. But it would be almost immediately that the horrors they would inflict on their so-called foreign enemies would become impossible to defend as well. In 1954, the CIA would help overthrow the government of Guatemala. But their crime was not building nuclear weapons, planning terrorist attacks, or anything else that a normal person would ever assume. In reality, Guatemala had committed the unforgivable sin of threatening American banana profits. The story begins during World War II, when Guatemala held its first ever democratic election after decades of military dictatorships and internal struggle. And the people during this election would elect Juan Jose Arevalo, a philosophy professor who had previously been forced into exile for opposing the old regime. His government would introduce labor protections, better voting rights. Overall, they were trying to modernize the country. And a few years later, when Jacobo Arbenz succeeded him, he pushed even further. His plan was to supercharge progress, growth, and prosperity by giving away free land to the country's massive underclass of landless peasants, for lack of a better word. The only problem was that the land Arbenz wanted to redistribute was owned by the United Fruit Company, an American banana corporation from New Orleans, Louisiana, that basically owned Guatemala at the time.
Okay.
I mean, not only did they own roughly 50% of all arable land in Guatemala and over 90% of the country's banana exports, but they even had the rights to Guatemala's only Atlantic-facing port, their entire railroad network, and their telegraph system. Basically, nothing could enter, leave, or be communicated across Guatemala without passing through something that the United Fruit Company owned. Many Guatemalans at the time called the company El Pulpo, or the octopus, because of how its tentacles reached into every facet of the nation's operations. For a lot of people, they were considered a parasite on the country itself. But the worst part of it all was that even though they owned half the country's farmland and all of these plantations, they actually weren't even using 85% of the land they owned, which prevented competition and kept prices high in one fell swoop. And so when President Arbenz announced that he was going to redistribute unused land and compensate the owners based on the value they had declared on their tax returns, United Fruit panicked because United Fruit had been lying on their tax returns for years, claiming that their unused land was worth almost nothing to avoid having to pay for it. And so now that the Guatemalan government was offering to buy that land at the exact value they had reported, they had a problem on their hands. Suddenly, the company wanted the full market value instead. Guatemala, of course, said no. So United Fruit hired Edward Bernays, a renowned marketer known mainly for helping popularize cigarettes with women in the 1920s by branding them as symbols of feminism, to convince Americans that Guatemala had gone communist and needed to be stopped. And Bernays orchestrated a full-on propaganda campaign.
Yo, the propaganda's crazy.
He brought American journalists down to Guatemala on all expenses paid trips and fed them stories about the Soviets influencing the country to be anti-American. He planted articles in major newspapers describing Arbenz as a communist puppet, and by 1953, much of America believed that Guatemala was a Soviet satellite state sitting right at their doorstep. And the Eisenhower administration was more than ready to back this narrative, not necessarily for the reason you might assume though, because Secretary of State John Foster Dulles had previously worked for the law firm that represented United Fruit. Meanwhile, his brother Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, had also served on the UFC's board of trustees and was a major shareholder in the company. To top it off, Eisenhower's personal secretary was married to United Fruit's top public relations executive. In other words, people in the White House were so heavily involved with United Fruit that they were willing to do whatever it took to keep their investment safe, even if that meant destroying the nation of Guatemala. To make the idea of an American takeover of Guatemala believable, the CIA had American pilots fly P-47 Thunderbolts over Guatemala City, bombing fuel stations and military bases. They set up a fake radio station called the Voice of Liberation that broadcast fabricated reports of a massive rebel army closing in from every direction. CIA operatives personally visited Guatemalan military commanders, warning them that if they didn't stand down, the full weight of the United States military would be next. Then they went even further and recruited a disgruntled former Guatemalan military officer named Carlos Castillo Armas to lead a fake insurgency against the military. In reality, the invading force they were sending into the country was tiny. Like fewer than 200 guys. But between the radio propaganda, the bombings, and the psychological warfare, the Guatemalan military panicked. Arbenz tried to arm civilians to resist, but the country's military officers pressured him to resign instead. They believed that fighting would be pointless, facing up against what they thought was an overwhelmingly large American force. Ultimately, 10 days later, President Arbenz resigned and ended up in hiding in the Guatemalan embassy in Mexico. The CIA sent a telegram back to Washington that simply read, "Success." Castillo Armas took power 10 days later, and the purge began immediately. Supporters of the Arbenz government were arrested by the thousands. Politicians, union leaders, and peasant organizers who had pushed for land distribution were all taken away. Within months, more than 9,000 Guatemalans had been detained. And then, people started disappearing. No one knows exactly how many people were executed in the first few months, but conservative estimates say hundreds. Other sources put the number closer to 5,000. Either way, Guatemala's brief experiment with democracy was over. Castillo Armas reversed all of Arbenz's reforms.
Yo, this is so fucked, but they went so yo, gang. These niggas just went so crazy in the sickest way, gang.
He gave the land back to United Fruit and he banned opposition parties. Guatemala had been turned back into a dictatorship with years of progress erased, purely so that one American company could protect their assets. Even today, many decades later, Guatemala is still considered highly underdeveloped when compared to nearby nations. But the story doesn't end there. After the coup, the CIA launched another project called Operation PB History. CIA officers searched through Arbenz government archives looking for evidence that Guatemala really had been under Soviet influence. They found nothing. No Soviet funding, no Soviet weapons. President Arbenz wasn't even a communist. In reality, historians describe him as being inspired more than anything politically by American President FDR, and having no ties to communism at all. But the CIA's plan still worked anyway. Castillo Armas was eventually assassinated by his own presidential guard just a couple of years later, which might make you think would help the country stabilize. But instead, Guatemala only descended further into chaos. The ensuing civil war was bloody, deadly, and disturbing. It lasted for more than 35 years. By the time it was over, more than 200,000 Guatemalans had been killed or disappeared. A United Nations Truth Commission later concluded that over 90% of the atrocities were committed by US-backed government forces. Guatemala's history, present, and future had been completely derailed, and it all traced back to the 1954 coup. The CIA had overthrown a democracy, installed a dictatorship, and set the stage for 4 decades of violence as punishment for the country daring to write their own story and protect themselves. And
propaganda that
ultimately,
had
all of this
niggas
showed the
convinced
CIA
Afghanistan
that
was
overthrowing
domestic
foreign
and
governments
Iranian.
would be far easier and cheaper than negotiating with them. In 1953, the CIA would run almost the same exact playbook across the world in Iran. Back then, a single British company controlled virtually all of Iran's nearly endless oil fields. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which we know today by the name BP, had struck a deal in 1908 that gave them exclusive rights to drill all of the country's oil for 60 years. Iran, in exchange, would receive just 16% of the company's net profits. In reality, they were getting even less than that. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company cooked their books. They sold oil at a loss to the British government. Basically, they did just about everything they could to avoid paying Iran their fair share. Meanwhile, working conditions for Iranians in the oil fields were brutal. They were paid less than 50 cents per day, with no sick leave, no workers' rights, and they often lived in housing with no running water or electricity. Often, if injured, they would be left for dead while they pulled black gold out of the blazing hot desert ground to be sent off to power the bright lights and heavy machines of the rapidly industrializing world that left them behind. By 1950, the British company's profits from Iranian oil reached around $140 million every year. Iran, even after renegotiating, was receiving less than 20% of that. But enter Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was a career politician, a European-educated aristocrat, and he had been in the Iranian political scene for decades. He honestly wasn't a crazy revolutionary. In reality, he was a pretty old, stately guy, but he had a vision for the future. Mossadegh wanted to see Iran modernized. He wanted to lift up the country's overwhelmingly large underclass and bring his nation forward. The only problem was that Iran had no way to pay for this change without reclaiming the oil revenue they were missing out on. And so in 1951, after he was elected prime minister, he and the Iranian parliament voted overwhelmingly to nationalize the country's oil and take their natural resources back. But for the next 2 years, British leaders began attempting to overthrow Mossadegh by any means necessary. They would blockade Iranian ports, they would embargo Iranian oil companies, and even petition US President Harry Truman to join their efforts, although he refused and even at one point considered assisting Mossadegh's government in their quest for independence instead. But even though Iran's economy was starting to collapse, even though England was basically strangling the country, Mossadegh didn't bend. Sometime later, though, when Dwight Eisenhower succeeded Truman, the British came back and appealed to the Americans.
What do you know that the rest of us don't know since you're so smart? Are you a part of them? Do I look like I'm a part of them, bro? Do I seem to be a part of them, my nigga? You think I would do that to y'all niggas, bro? Come on, bro. I'll tell you this for one thing. The more and more I watch these videos, there is for sure a social media influencer that is a plant, bro. Persuading things, bro. Like, there's just for sure is. Like, there's no way there's not. And one day, in about a few years, maybe a decade, there's gonna be a video on how this streamer or YouTuber or musician or some shit influenced millions of people and we didn't even know. Right under our noses, gang. It's gonna happen. I know it's gonna happen, gang.
Again, this time emphasizing the threat of Iranian communism instead of just their desire to dominate the oil industry. They sent one of their top agents, Christopher Montague.
It's gonna be one of the niggas that has reached to a lot of the casual audience. Niggas like me, I'm hella niche. Y'all might think I'm hella cat. No, bro. No, bro. We're hella in our own little pocket. It's gonna be someone that has hella influence on the casual audience of life and social media and shit.
To Washington to present the case for a coup. Woodhouse realized that the Americans would not swing into action simply to recover Britain's oil company, so he shrewdly came up with another argument. Not wishing to be accused of trying to use the Americans to pull British chestnuts out of the fire, he himself wrote later, "I decided to emphasize the communist threat to Iran rather than the need to recover control of the oil industry." The Dulles brothers, the head of the CIA and Department of State at the time, who had also overseen the Guatemala invasion, leapt at that argument, just as Woodhouse knew they would. The pitch worked perfectly. The Eisenhower White House immediately authorized a joint CIA and MI6 operation to get rid of Mossadegh forever. And so they handed Kermit Roosevelt Jr., CIA officer and President Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, several $1 million and told him to use it in any way that would bring about the fall of Mossadegh. First, the CIA
Kai
and
gutted it out
MI6
the mud,
visited
not gonna
newspaper
lie.
editors
No,
with
Kai ain't no
suitcases full of
fucking-
cash,
nigga, what?
offering to pay them to run fabricated stories painting Mossadegh as power-hungry and secretly in league with communists. Then they hired men off the streets, from slums or even local gangsters, to stage violent street demonstrations that could be blamed on Mossadegh supporters. They were told to identify themselves as communists and vandalize shops, loot markets, and tear down statues. They manufactured a revolution, creating the illusion that the country was tearing itself apart and that it was all Mossadegh's fault. The plan all hinged on
what do you even do against that? Like, isn't that just OP? Like, what? How could like let's say they want to do something, like, how would you even like? There's literally nothing you could do. like what the fuck? Low key, when is the next collab? GG.
One thing, that the Shah, the
king is that Homelander
of Iran, would see all of this and decide to use his power to dismiss Mossadegh. After enough pressure and chaos, he did. By the time his messenger arrived to dismiss the prime minister, though, it was too late. Mossadegh had caught on to the plan and arrested the messenger. The coup had failed. The CIA was exposed. The streets of Tehran erupted with crowds chanting, "Yankees go home." Iran was saved, and the CIA had been outsmarted. Any and all CIA operators involved were ordered to leave the country by their bosses in Washington. Believing the coup had been defeated, Mossadegh banned all public demonstrations and told his supporters to go home, trying to restore order and thinking it was safe. But this was actually a big mistake. All he had really done was clear the streets for the CIA to try again, because Kermit Roosevelt had refused to give up. Just a few days later, he printed more fake news articles in the papers, created a new army of fake protesters, and marched into Tehran to overthrow the government again. In the end, hundreds of people died and Mossadegh's home was stormed with tanks and soldiers. He ultimately surrendered, and after a prison sentence spent in solitary confinement, spent the rest of his life under house arrest in a tiny desert village, while other members of his staff were executed by firing squad. On the day Mossadegh was convicted, he was reported to have sarcastically said, "The verdict of this court has increased my historical glories. I am extremely grateful that you convicted me. Truly, tonight, the Iranian nation understands the meaning of constitutionalism." This also, again, is not a conspiracy, since—
Yo, bro. That shit's scary, gang.
2013, the US government has formally acknowledged their responsibility for the Iranian coup, with the CIA being quoted as saying that the coup was carried out under CIA direction and that it was an act of US foreign policy conceived and approved at the highest levels of government.
That's
One American
scary,
diplomat would later
gang.
say, "The removal of Mossadegh was a tragic mistake. We caused, in effect, the Khamenei Revolution by doing that." Because it wasn't just that they overthrew a leader who was trying to make his country better. The Shah that they left behind to rule as king, he controlled Iran with an iron fist for 25 more years.
Holy shit.
He killed thousands of people, disappeared even more, and ultimately turned Iran into a puppet state for Western powers.
Holy
of course,
shit.
handing over control of Iran's oil back to Western companies in the process. When he was overthrown during the incredibly violent Iranian Revolution in the 1970s, the radical theocratic group that replaced him and rules to this day was seen by many as a long-tail result of CIA intervention in Iranian politics and economics. And it all started not because Iran was an enemy of the United States, not because they were under Soviet influence and aligning themselves with America's rivals, but because they wanted to build their own future and remove the United Kingdom's parasitic influence from their economy. For almost a century now, this is how the American empire has grown. Not through violent invasions and outright domination, but if a foreign sovereign nation challenged American economic interests or influence, they would be quickly destroyed from within. In Chile in the early 1970s, President Salvador Allende came to power on a promise to nationalize the country's abundant natural resources and put billions of dollars towards improving living conditions within the country. The only problem was that those resources he wanted to take advantage of, copper mines and more, were presently controlled by American corporations. In return, President Richard Nixon ordered the CIA to make their economy scream. 3 years later, a military coup backed and paid for by the CIA installed Augusto Pinochet as president. His regime would kill more than 3,000 people and torture tens of thousands more, permanently staining the modern history of Chile. In the Congo, in 1960, Patrice Lumumba, the country's first democratically elected prime minister, gets assassinated by the CIA just months after taking office. In Argentina, in 1976, they backed a military dictatorship that led to the death of more than 30,000 civilians. Cuba, Vietnam, Bolivia, Italy, Brazil, Panama, Venezuela, Australia, Poland. The list goes on and on and on. In total, Sources say that the United States, mainly covertly and through the CIA, has been involved with more than 80 coups and foreign interventions from the 1940s to the 2000s. In my mind, when I was younger and didn't know any of this, it was always kind of hard to understand what people were saying when they talked about the United States being an empire. When I hear the word empire, I think of England in the 19th century, where there was a point in time that 25% of people on Earth were considered citizens or subjects of the United Kingdom. Or you think of ancient Macedonia, where Alexander the Great had conquered every inch of land between Greece and India on
let's conquer some land on some gangster shit.
31 years old. When you hear the word empire, you think conquering territory, absorbing the entire planet, dominating the world under one flag. And the United States is a global superpower, but
there's gotta be some land that nobody been to before, gang. That could be all this shit.
World. In reality, it's been like 120 years since America has colonized anything. If the goal was to be an empire, it kind of looks like we gave up a long time ago. But when a country, over the course of decades, repeatedly and secretly destroys any foreign government that tries to determine its own future and leaves a pile of ashes and destroyed lives in its wake, all while it rises higher and higher in power and influence, there really is only one word for what that country is: an empire. When Chile tries to take control of its own copper mines, when Iran tries to take control of its own oil, when Guatemala tries to take back its own banana plantations, and they all get destroyed in return, they are living under an empire. And so it's not that the United States isn't an empire, it's that we got so good at being one that we figured out how to do it without ever having to admit it out loud.
American imperialism has ruined the world.
I ain't gonna lie. We is the bad guys, gang. But at the same time, we are not. We are just civilians living inside the bad guys' fucking world, gang. You know what I'm saying? We aren't the bad guys. They are the bad guys.
Would ultimately be major attempts to reign in the CIA during the late 1970s, driven by the public's shock and horror as information about MKUltra and other similar projects became impossible to contain as the years went on. And after extensive division, investigations, public controversy...
I got just as... I'm healed just like y'all, chat. I'm just like y'all for real, cuz. What? What she talking about? They basically kidnapped me, nigga. You a Kalshi agent. Yo, what y'all talking about, bro?
Threats towards congressmen and general political infighting, more control was granted to monitor what the CIA was doing. And it would be easy to say
You're
right
nothing
now,
like me, you
we
child.
don't hear much about what the CIA does these days. Maybe they got reined in or controlled,
That's what I'm saying.
but
I
that
want
is very much evidently not the case.
Facts.
But in the last 25 years since 9/11, the American government's power to surveil and control has only grown and grown with each passing year, leading again to instances such as the imprisonment of John Kiriakou that show us beyond any shadow of a doubt that there definitively is a sector of the American government that exists without being subject to rules, laws, or oversight. There is an American deep state. And of course, everything I mentioned is only one small slice of the story. The CIA has been accused of far worse. People have questioned whether or not they may have been involved with assassinating President JFK, who had fired director Allen Dulles, the guy behind Guatemala and other operations, and directly opposed their agenda in public. One of the most resounding unresolved threads in the recent history of the CIA is that of the Dark Alliance, a series of essays released in the late 1990s by investigative journalist Gary Webb for the San Jose Mercury News. Webb alleged that the CIA had backed Contra rebels and knowingly allowed them to funnel cocaine into the US to fund their guerrilla war against the socialist government of Nicaragua during the 1980s, and that drug trade had directly fueled the crack epidemic that devastated black neighborhoods across the country. The story ignited a firestorm, although it mainly led to Webb being discredited by major media outlets and largely
Watch Snowfall, bro. I am telling you. You cannot be a black man or woman and leaving Snowfall. You could be any race in general, but like, and leave that show and it's not in your top something shows of all time, gang. That's going on your list. Snowfall is so fucking good, gang. It's so fucking good, gang. I'm white and I bet you'll still love it, bro.
Ridiculed in the public. In 2004, Webb was found dead with 2 gunshots to the head. His death was and that drug trade had directly fueled the crack epidemic that devastated black neighborhoods across the country. The story ignited a firestorm, although it mainly led to Webb being discredited by major media outlets and largely ridiculed in the public. In 2004, Webb was found dead with 2 gunshots to the head. His death was ruled a suicide, but it wouldn't be long after that that
2 gunshot wounds to the head? Yeah, he did it to himself, gang. Yo, there's 2 holes in this nigga head? He killed himself, bro. For surely. Let's go with that one.
the CIA's own Inspector General admitted that Gary Webb was right. They admitted that the CIA had knowingly supported groups that were trafficking drugs into the US. Gary Webb was correct, but in return he received humiliation and ultimately lost his life. But let me ask you something. Did you vote for MKUltra? I mean, none of us did. Our grandparents were probably too young to vote back then when that was going on. But did anyone? Did anyone vote for drugging prisoners until their brains melted?
Okay.
Did anyone vote for taking people who had gone to the hospital and putting them in comas for years?
Fuck no.
Did anyone vote to overthrow Guatemala's government so badly
Rage
that they were
did.
still fighting a civil war 50 years later so that a banana company could keep their useless land holdings? Did anyone vote to destroy Iran's future forever so that British Petroleum
Shout
could
out
keep
K-Song.
stealing their oil? Did anyone go to the polls and check a box that said, yes, let's build a secret program where we torture random Muslim guys that aren't even connected to Al-Qaeda, and if an agent tells the world about it, let's
Does
send
every
him to
country-
prison? We live in a country where freedom and liberty
Okay, I
are
have a
worshipped.
question. I might sound retarded. Do the civilians of other countries think like us though? Like, damn, we're the bad guys. Damn, is this happening on their YouTube too, or nah? It's just unique for us. Yeah.
As the highest goods of all. But when I look at the CIA and their history, what I see is a distortion of those values in every
America is an
possible way.
empire.
Whether it's a
Oil,
desecration,
elections, war, rates/bet on everything now using code YRG until she.
Yo, what the fuck?
of the freedom and liberty of people in other nations to sustain our own power, or a violation of our own freedoms and liberties in service of goals that now, looking back, look psychotic and sadistic more than anything else. At the beginning of this video, I promised that I would help you decide for yourselves what the CIA tells us about our country, that we would better understand what America even is. And for me, what I've come to understand while working on this project is that we live in an empire whose existence has been perpetuated by torching the world around
Use
us
our own power to do
maintain
horrible shit.
control.
You're
Not even
lying.
to protect the freedom and liberty of its own citizens, but instead to build bigger and better machines to experiment on and exploit innocent people. Former congressional investigator Dan Hardway wrote in 2017 that while he was working on the case surrounding the assassination of JFK, one thing that stuck with
You think they ever be on these YouTubers' ass that be like putting this information that is already public information, but into casual hands, gang, to like the casual audience and shit? You think they ever be on these content creators' asses and shit? Cause some of the shit Hazan has told me, I don't know how true it is, gang. I'm just assuming not lying though. Is low key kind of scary. If that's just, like, it's low key like, yo, bro, like it's not a movie, gang. That shit real life.
him the most was what a retired officer said to him personally during a deposition. "You represent Congress. What the fuck is that to the CIA? You'll be gone in 2 years, and the CIA will still be here." What Hardway wrote next sums it up for all of us better than I can. He wrote to his readers, "You are the people that Congress supposedly represents. What's that to the CIA? You'll forget about it in a few weeks or so." I'm Philip, this is Volksgeist. You can go to spiritworld.store to support our channel, buy some
Dang.
t-shirts, some sweaters, grab some merch.
Bro, all this shit, all this info is in our face, and it's like nobody really cares, gang. I mean, we obviously care, but like nobody, like, what can you even do? Like what the fuck?